Good evening and welcome to the first TNT panel, standing for Tuesdays and Thursdays, traditional and trade. So I've opened it up from obviously still including self-published authors, but along as the weeks go on, most Tuesdays and Thursdays, not every single one, because we are there are things cropping up, and to involve people in the whole industry. It's a very lovely industry to be in, as we shall find out this evening. Not the easiest of professions to have, especially if you are a self-published author. But I was originally going to go with the topic of author's journey, but most of the authors who are involved in Self Pub Fest are doing an author spotlight, which talks about themselves and it covers themselves and their writing journey from the first thing they wrote right up to what they're working on next. So Andrea very kindly came up with a slight sidestep, which I've then encompassed into the whole writing community. So I'm going to hand over to Andrea, who is going to introduce herself and talk about a little bit about the book that she's written, which we will come back to more later, and the John Donne quote, "No man is an island." Good evening, Andrea.
Good evening. It's nice to be here. So what do you really want to know about me? I've only written one book, but I've been a writer for a number of years, writing magazine articles and education things. But I had my arm twisted into becoming an author. And I know that seems really strange because I think a lot of people sort of dream of writing and then sort of finally sort of make their dream come true. But it really wasn't on my list of things. The book I've written is a book about a major general in the political intelligence in Syria, and he ended up in one of Assad's dungeons, and then he ended up with me, which was probably slightly better than being in the dungeon. And we spent
One would hope so, yes.
and we spent lockdown together. And when Assad fell, he really wanted his story to be told.
Mm,
And I really feel it's a good story because it helps to explain others. And I think we have a lot of conflict currently in the UK. People are unhappy about the number of immigrants who come over on boats seeking refuge, but we don't really know their stories. And we don't really know why they sort of leave their home and sort of travel perilously across the world to
mm.
get to England. And this story is one person's perspective of it and how much he's grown to love England, by the way. And he's
And
really
also
happy.
the fact that you've got somebody in that who had been in that position,
Yeah,
because invariably there are books written from a civilian or perhaps a different kind of career, not certainly not within the military,
yeah,
and not from the point that he was at,
yeah.
um, telling their story, whereas this is really an insider's story, isn't it?
Oh, absolutely.
Mm,
And also about the culture of Syria. And it reminds me very much of what's happening in Iran now.
mm,
You know, America can try and sort of cut the head off the government, but there are people in the National Guard who are prepared to go onto the streets and kill their brothers, their sisters,
mm,
their mothers, their daughters, and their fathers because they believe in the regime.
right.
And the fact that a foreign power is now bombing that country
Mm,
isn't going to change the essence of the culture. And, as Nasser says in his story, he grew up and his school indoctrinated the children um, to be part of Assad's Syria
mm,
and to believe that Hafez Assad was better than God.
mm,
His picture appeared absolutely everywhere
mm,
when Nasser was a child. And, who was this strange man?
mm.
And I think if we look at it from our cultural perspective, it's difficult to understand how people's thinking really does get affected by how much pressure they're under to conform and obey.
Mm.
It's taking the easy path, isn't it? Really.
It'd be interesting to know what he thinks of what's happened now, and because the new regime, I understand, is the sun
Yeah,
in Iran, um, and
yeah,
yes, it's interesting seeing it playing out from a distance, thankfully. But when you're in it, can't
yeah,
imagine.
yeah, yeah.
Alastair, welcome to your first participation, the first TNT of many, I hope, with
Thank
you,
you.
because I do know you in real life,
Mm.
as they say. You're very welcome. Do tell us about you and your books. You have two, I understand, so
Yeah,
far.
thank you, Morgan. Thanks very much for having me. Yeah, I'm writing a trilogy actually, and I'm two in. I've written two, and I'm sort of 12,500 words into the third one.
Mm.
And you know, a bit similar to what we've just been hearing. I was I worked for a charity, and the second part of my working life, and I was sort of sent because I was head of communications and advocacy. I was sort of our workers out there. I was sent straight into the sort of front end. There was no sort of in Central Asia. This is,
Yeah,
and I heard I had stories really from survivors really of what they call à la kachu, which is Russian for bride kidnapping. I mean, I live in Hertfordshire. Whoever talks about bride kidnapping in England, in the UK, or in Hertfordshire, and no one. But it's a thing. It's a cultural misdemeanor that goes on in Central Asia, and particularly in the country that I was involved with. Now, um, we the charity I worked with rescued people. Excuse me. Alakachu often is bride kidnapping. You're taken off into the mountains. You're never seen again. You're a 15-year-old girl,
right.
a schoolgirl often, 14-year-old, 15-year-old, and because there's a kind of lack of women in nomadic Central Asia,
Mm.
and it's a very nomadic region. It's one of the old Russian republics. The
Right.
stans, Uzbekistan, Tajikistan, Kazakhstan, Kyrgyzstan, and Turkmenistan. And so I was involved with one of those stans, and um, but I was privileged, really, really privileged to have heard these stories from survivors. And and I thought, when I left after about 18 years I wasn't living in Central Asia. I was going there quite regularly.
Mm.
When I I retired from it actually, and went a little bit early and just went into authorship because I was originally a journalist. Um, I thought actually, well, I've been taught how to write. I suppose I learnt my craft in journalism,
Absolutely.
which is a real privilege to do that as well. I was a tennis journalist, so I wrote international tennis, and had my own seat at Wimbledon downwards. Really, I was really privileged to do that. But I learnt my craft. Then I went into Central Asia and heard these testimonies, domestic violence and things like that, and uh, I felt in retirement. Thought, gosh, this is the journey I've been on, and I've got to write about this. I've been trained in writing, and I'm not saying whether I'm any good or not. I'm just saying I've been trained, and I've learned. I've got all this. I've got something really worthwhile to write about. That's not to say tennis wasn't worthwhile, but it's only a sport. Whereas, um, t but obviously this was significant.
Mm.
And just one last thing really to explain is that often if I do a WI talk or a U3A talk or something like that,
Mm.
I often well, especially with women, I just apologize really for being a man writing about it. However, um, I went to a conference in London on domestic violence when I was doing my research, and the lady, there were about 100 people in the room. There were four men, and I was one of them. And the chair of trustees got up and just said, "I'd really like to just thank the four men for being here because, we as women can talk about some of the challenges and issues that we face, and rightly so.
Yes.
But for men to write about it
Mm.
and, understand it. And so I've done it from a position of understanding, writing the novels. And
Yeah.
they are fictional novels based on factual
Sure.
content.
But I think having one side, one half just over half apparently, of of the population being heard. It's you get one half of a story. The fact that there were only four men in a way surprised me because, as we know from reports on the television, yes, most cases are a partner against a woman, but there are more and more, I think these days, reported certainly
mm,
incidences the other way around of the
mm,
wife against the husband. It's just perhaps in, because I think we are more open these days to being able to express our feelings and wear what we like and do what we like up to a certain point, which I think is great. Um, and so I think it's important to have you writing about it,
mm.
because then we're getting your view of it,
Yes.
um,
I mean, yes,
rather than
yes,
just
yes.
one side of the story.
Sorry, yes. I was just going to say that, that's from a UK perspective. That I was in a UK conference, but in
Yeah,
Central Asia, it's all men on women. It's all men
right,
on women. It's a
right,
misogynistic, it's a cultural, historical misdemeanor that men dominate women, and
right,
it's, dare I say it, a religious thing, and it happens, and it's kind of it's illegal to bride kidnap, of course, but
right.
it's turned a blind eye to by the
Yeah,
government, that type of thing. And anyway, Central Asia is kind of Wales times 100. It's kind of mountainous and regional, and massive. So if you're a bride kidnapped off one of the few cities that are in Central Asia, big
mm,
cities, you're taken off into the mountains and never seen again. So where do the police start? Where do
yeah.
the
Well,
so,
it's interesting you use the word misdemeanor, because in
mm,
certain locales and I'm not going to use the word religions, but in certain societies, it's certain violence or kidnapping or crimes are seen as misdemeanors.
mm,
And so
mm,
how do you kind of battle against that?
mm,
So I think it's wonderful that you've written about it, and the fact that you had the journalistic, because I've a few of the author spotlights have been the authors have been former journalists, and I think it's wonderful because you know deadlines, you know how to
mm,
be concise,
mm.
and so it's a perfect setup for being a writer.
One thing I would say, though, that I think I was a little arrogant at the beginning that I could just transfer my journalistic skills into authorship. It is a different,
It is, yeah, it's a craft.
whole different thing.
Yes, especially fiction, because you've got certain,
Yeah.
yes, certain,
90,000 words. I
yeah,
would interview Sandra. My era was sort of Agassi, Connors, Henman, that crowd, and you'd string that you'd basically get them to talk, and you string those quotes together, and that would be
yeah,
an article and a beginning and an end.
yeah,
So, and or a tournament you're talking about, and all you do is really talk about the winners and how they got there.
mm,
So it was. I found it fairly easy actually to write. I found it much harder to be an author than to be a journalist, if
right,
I'm honest.
right. It's,
Mm.
it
I
is,
actually,
it is a, yes, it's a different skill set.
yeah,
Yeah,
yeah. I
sorry.
I actually found I'd had an operation on my Achilles tendon, and I was sort of stuck on the sofa, and I had this project ahead of me, and I had no distractions, and I really fell in love with the process.
Mm.
And I think it was, I look back on it and I think it's like sort of designing a garden. You've got this big blank sort of patch of land, and you
Mm,
start deciding that you're going to put, one tree here and some shrubs there, and
mm,
then you sort of start writing and you put those things in place and it doesn't fit, and then you move them around and play with them. And I'm probably very inefficient because I don't really consider myself a writer, but
mm.
I found I really enjoyed the process, and I really enjoy putting words on paper.
Mm. Mm.
And
But also,
playing with them.
you're telling somebody else's story.
Mm.
Yeah,
So
yeah,
Yes.
there's going to be more, well, do we go chronologically, or so there is bound to be
yeah.
that. And I don't know how Alastair, how near your first drafts are to your completed. I don't know if that's
Yeah.
a question you can answer.
Yes, it is. They're very different, actually. I kind of make it up as I go along, based
Right.
on basically I write what I like to call redemptive novels. So although it's a tough subject to write about and there's quite grim stuff going on,
Mm,
and I write the dialogue, I make that up. But I always like to have a good ending, good over evil kind of thing at the end. So there is exposure. So I've created basically the trilogy as I've created a journalist, a young, thrusting young girl who's out of university and wants to see justice in her country and goes after cartels and people who, sin in this way, really, men who sin in this way. And so she goes after them and exposes them. And so there is that, and or whether it's government led, right up to the top, the government and other groups of people, nomads, if you like. But and so there, and the third one is about trafficking. So these are big issues in Central Asia. They're big
mm,
issues, and trafficking's a big issue anywhere, but
mm.
in Central Asia they're big issues. So in answer to your question, the draft is different to the final product, and often I wake up in the night and think actually I need to change that, or I change the direction of travel for something, if you
Yeah,
see what I mean.
yeah.
One thing you might find, one thing I did wake up in the night was this book, the second one,
Mm,
is called No One Hears You Scream, but Silence Will Be Heard, with a picture of a ger in the mountains, a ger, a yurt, if you like,
okay.
tent where they live. But No
Yeah.
One Hears You Scream came to me in the night, and it's a direct quote from a woman who's probably dead now,
Mm,
from something that I was reminded of in my research from Oxford
mm,
University or something, research. And it's a shocking title, really. No One Hears You Scream,
mm.
but Silence Will Be Heard, and that's the journalistic bit. We hear you. We're going to do something
Oh,
about this,
yeah.
even if for you or for the people, your friends, your colleagues, your fellow
Yeah,
villagers.
absolutely.
That's
And did
kind
you
of what we're
find,
doing.
question to both of you, Andrea and then Alastair, did you find that there was anything, because we will be talking later on in the TNT series about taboo topics, but within NASA's story, is there anything that you felt was either too personal or too shocking, that because although you're both inspired by true events, obviously you're writing, Andrea, you're writing his story,
Yeah.
Alastair, you're writing a fictionalized version of it. Did you find with NASA either he maybe told you something but said I don't want that in the book, or
Yeah.
he said I don't mind, I'm telling you everything. You decide what to put in the book. Whether, I mean, you don't have to be specific, but were there things that you thought, actually, no, this is too much. I have to keep this out.
Um, Actually, not from my side, but he had told me things, I'd sort of written them down, and then he'd accepted them, and then at a later time he goes, "No, I don't want that.
No.
I don't want that person. I don't want to name that person, or I don't want that to be said."
Mm,
Um, so yeah, there was a little bit of editorial stuff, but also from the prison, which is a pretty dark place.
mm,
Um, I didn't sort of describe the tortures, and I didn't think it was necessary
no.
to. I just think
No.
the actual conditions of the prison were such that, if you could just imagine yourself sort of picking lice out of your clothing or
Mm,
being in the same set of clothes for 6 months,
mm,
without being able to sort of change them,
sure.
and and living with a sort of an open sewer sort of in
Mm,
your cell.
mm.
I just think that, just imagining that is enough,
Yeah,
really.
well, I'm not belittling physical abuse, but I think sometimes it's a bit like there's an old black and white film called Gaslight.
Yeah,
And I think sometimes, if whether it's repetition or people being made to feel they're worthless, that mental torture can, especially prolonged, can, and even if it's not changing the same clothes, to I don't know whether I should say to some teenagers that's probably yay great. I wear the same thing for 6 months, and as some adults do, but
yeah,
not being, there's the restriction, isn't there? A, not being able to go anywhere, but
Yeah.
also so many little thing restrictions that have added up to this lifestyle for how long was he in prison for?
He was in prison for 7 months,
Right.
and he actually went mentally crazy
Yeah.
and attacked everything that moved, and they discharged him and said he was, crazy, lost his mind,
Right.
take him away.
Yeah.
But at the time, he was the highest level prisoner they had.
Right.
Um, so I don't think he suffered the worst of it, but he didn't stand trial, and I think it would have been a kangaroo court, but he didn't
Yeah.
stand trial because he wasn't in a fit mental state to
No.
stand trial.
No. Wow.
Yeah.
Alastair, have you found that do you think it's easier having written fiction than if you were re writing it as non-fiction?
Whereas in tennis, you're writing fact, and therefore, I suppose I was always going to be a factual writer turned fiction story. But
Yeah.
one of the horrors I mean, what we've just heard is, horrible, really. One of the things we do get into is femicide. I don't know if people are familiar with that word, but it's about men who kill women for pleasure, really, um, and there are femicide cartels going on in because it's the done thing, and it's
Right.
I'm not saying it's, you know, an everyday occurrence, but I'm just saying it happens.
Sure.
And so I've touched on that in one of the books, which is a bit horrific. However, in going back to the question, the original question you asked was that one thing I've done because I'm writing about Central Asia, obviously I was out there and I made friends from Central Asia, and I um, befriended a couple which I've kept in touch with, and one who's now working for the U.S. administration, yeah, as a civil servant basically, and but she's a fluent speaker and Russian speaker, and so she, I have an authenticity editor.
Oh, handy.
Yeah, and
Yeah.
I acknowledge her in both books, and the reason I have that is because I want to make sure just the cultural nuances are right. How do you touch someone? How do you shake hands with them? How do you hug them? All this sort of thing.
Mm.
I kind of knew it, but that's the basic level. But then and how do you address someone? That type of thing. But also right up to what are the issues going on currently, and she keeps quite a strong link in that, and she's on the Asian desk, actually, Central Asian
Right.
desk in the
Right.
Washington administration. So she knows she's right on it, and so
Yeah.
she very kindly reads my books and advises me. And she says, "You can't say that. You can say this. You do this."
Sure.
And
Sure.
I think there's apart from my experience out there, I think I've learnt to adapt really to cultural
Mm.
nuances, things I need to have in there. And I'm not sure if that quite addressed your question, but it's just kind of that's where I've got to, where I've
Yes.
landed really. Mm.
Yes. Well, it's nice to have the sort of the extra touches, even if it's a particular biscuit. I think in one of my stories, I had I can't even remember where it was. I think it was a short story. And they had a particular, I researched the particular type of biscuit. I mean, I think it was a country I'd never been to, or it might have been Germany, which I've been to dozens of times. But I think just little touches prove, whenever I get sent a book, I'm um, just sent back one first set of read throughs that's very much a sort of Andy McNab style war book and fiction. Um,
Mm.
and obviously, I have to check the facts that I can check, but you can tell from reading it that he's been there, he's
Mm.
done it. It's his life effectively
Mm.
um, as a novel, because there were certain things that nobody can find out.
Mm.
And I think you need that if you're going to. They say write what you know, and which is absolutely true for both of your cases. Have you
Mm.
set have you set Alastair your books in any particular era, or is it just sort of contemporary now? Could
Mm.
be any time in the
Mm.
recent history.
It's contemporary now. It's contemporary now, and the reason I did that is because it's been going on for centuries. The whole Silk Road culture,
Right.
and Mongols and everything like that, and it's kind of But it's been going on for centuries, so why not set it now? Why set it historically? Because it
Yeah.
happens now. It happens now, and that's
Yes.
what I suppose I wanted to expose a little bit, without offending, without offence, making taking offence, but
Mm,
to the countries. But I just wanted to expose it as something that's going on now and raise
sure.
people's awareness of it, I suppose.
Yeah, no, absolutely.
In
I
fact,
mean,
October, interestingly enough, is this year that I didn't realise there's a domestic violence month in this
it,
country, and it's in October, which
right.
is maybe timely for the
Absolutely.
your next event. But
Absolutely.
that's you can make something of that if there's some other people like myself, who are writing about that sort of
Sure.
subject. But
Sure.
that's when I'm trying to launch the third book and then the trilogy
Okay.
as a whole,
Yeah,
because that's kind of an awareness raising thing.
sure. Okay. And Alistair, how have you found when you finished? I know you're a member of Chiltern Writers in Wendover,
Mm,
and I think we both went to Berkhamsted last year.
yeah.
How did you get on from going from a journalist to then writing? How did you then immerse yourself? What did you decide? Right, I need to get out more. I need to meet people. I want to go to
Mm,
festivals. And when did it change? For me, I was 38 and I came to 2005, I think. I moved from Buckinghamshire to Northamptonshire. I didn't know anybody, so I went to evening classes, and I started off with French, German, I think Excel, and then saw an advert for creative writing. I thought, well, I always enjoyed writing at school
mm, mm,
reading, so I'd go along. And that really kick-started me. Up to that point, I think I'd never thought that I would be a writer as such, that it would be something I would do. Can you remember when you did the books come first and then you branched out to meet other people, or
mm.
was it sort of hand in hand, or
Well,
did
I
that
kind
come
of
out?
needed something obviously you have to write the books first, I guess, because you have to have something to market. But
Mm,
it was burning in my heart really that it is, I have to say, and I suppose maybe this is quite unusual for a guy, but it's become a bit of a passion of mine to, I hate, violence, and I hate violence against women
mm,
and anyone but children. But
mm,
so I think and having, I suppose I sat back in on, my first day of retirement and thought, why have I been given all this knowledge? Why have I got all this knowledge? And I'm probably the only person in Hertfordshire that has that sort of frontline experience of what
sure.
goes on in Central Asia. And I
Yeah.
thought, what am I going to just die whenever I die, with just holding that knowledge in, and I just felt that having had all that exposure to wrongdoing, that I should share it, but in an accessible form. So
Mm,
it's not just, I met this person and she told me that story, and I met that
yes.
person and it's not like that at all. It's actually done
Yeah.
in novel form. So with a redemptive, a good ending over evil. So
Mm,
good over evil. So I think that's kind of where I, ended up. And then, of course, I had the books and I wanted to start marketing them. That's been a learning curve as well. So, what do you market? The unusual location, or do you market domestic violence, which isn't, it's not romantic fiction, which is very popular and very perhaps easier to market. I don't know. In a crowded market, do you market the uniqueness of the product?
mm,
I don't know, but I've tried quite a lot of ways, and I found that doing a lot. I had I think I mentioned earlier to you that I had a radio interview for an hour actually last Friday, and that was really good. I was able to expose and explain, the journey that I'm explaining now to you, but also a lot of social media, 3 platforms, and lots of speaking engagements if I can get them. And I find they're very uh, once you can get in front of an audience, you've got a much better chance of they're hitting you're able to explain your journey, and
yes.
therefore, if
Yeah,
it's
well, it's
interesting enough,
yes,
yeah,
a captive audience. They're
Yeah.
there. I mean, the great thing you mentioned WI U3A earlier on.
mm,
The thing about
mm,
them is that they've been primed as to who the speaker is in advance, but
mm,
then you have a captive audience, and you have a message. There's a message there to be told, and
mm,
I've noticed in the last sort of 5 or 10 years that a lot of the have gone from obviously there are still a lot of detective books, but a lot of the crime books have gone towards domestic noir and standalones rather than simply, because it tended to be series after series. So there are a lot more writers these days, traditionally published and otherwise, who are writing about the home setting.
Yeah.
And so lockdown, we have mentioned it and mention it again because it was, I remember at the time, there was the issue of if a husband and wife don't get on and they're now stuck together, maybe the husband or the wife went out to work and that was a release for a few hours. But
Mm.
now all of a sudden they're together and they have to be together legally. And we know
Mm.
it was a situation that was just of I wouldn't say
Yeah.
society is making, but of
Mm.
events around the world,
Mm.
that this was made that situation
Mm.
that much worse.
Yeah,
That was
just
one
one,
of
just,
the
just, oh,
remarkable
sorry.
things. Oh,
Yeah.
sorry.
No, I
No,
That
beg
was
your
one of
pardon,
the
after you.
remarkable. Oh, of my lockdown. I'd been in the country 2 weeks, and then I ended up picking up NASA from a detention centre,
mm,
and he, I'd known him before when I was working in Syria,
mm,
and he really wasn't the man that I remembered.
mm,
He was very much a shadow of his former self.
mm,
And we were stuck together in lockdown. I mean, it could have turned out very, very badly.
mm,
But surprisingly, we got on remarkably well. And my daughter lent him her bike, and we just cycled all over Milton Keynes and around the countryside and had
yeah.
a really lovely, lovely
Yeah.
lovely lockdown. And, which is an awful thing to say because so many people suffered terribly.
Mm.
So, yeah, I can imagine
But
how
yeah,
awful.
I think it went one way or the other. You're
Yeah,
either happy to spend 24 hours a day. See, my husband was doing shifts, which wasn't ideal for this because he might have been sleeping during the day when I needed to be doing
yeah,
interviews and so on. And now he works from home. So we've kind of gone from me hardly seeing him to him being around all the time, um, which is great. But yes,
yeah,
interesting situation.
Mm.
yeah,
Yeah, I was just going to say about the home environment you talked about
Yes.
within the context of lockdown. I mean,
Yeah.
obviously, the home environment I talk about is a completely ridiculously different culture to what we're used to. It's not what we're not talking about one bedroom flat, four bedroom house. We're not talking about that sort of
No.
not they even had lockdown. There's no lockdown on the hills of Central Asia, on the mountains of Central Asia. It's because
Yeah.
it's all outdoor, and they live in gairs and tents. So the great, the really nice thing about in my books was that I was able to explore and explain and write about completely different lifestyle that
Mm.
they lead. I mean, I've lived in I've been overnight in a gair and a yurt, and I've drunk milk from the horse's udder,
yeah,
because that's what they do. If they do want to drink a milk, they go to the horse and they get it for you.
Right.
I'd say it's a very agricultural taste. I wouldn't recommend it necessarily, but
Right.
but that's what they do. That's
Yes.
how they live, and they eat very fatty meat, and they eat, parts of the body, of an animal's body that you perhaps wouldn't think of eating over here,
Mm.
etc., etc. So
Yeah.
it's I was able to write a completely different cultural lifestyle than we would have had over here. Well, we have over here, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
And did
in the
you,
UK.
when you finished your first book, I know you
Mm.
planned the trilogy, did you um did you think, right, I'm going to self-publish this? Did you try to did you submit it anywhere else
Mm.
before you then turned to self-publishing?
Mm. Well, I didn't actually, and the reason I didn't do that, I made a deliberate, conscious effort. I explored it, of course, and an agent and everything, but I turned 60 when I retired, and I thought I can't be bothered with hanging around for a year,
Right.
sending out to 20 people and agents,
Yes.
and then I just can't be bothered with it. I just, time's too short. I had something to write. I was quite urgent to get it off my chest, if you like,
Right.
and I wanted to get on with it. And so I just self-published, and my wife is very clued up, and my daughter did the covers.
Okay.
She's a graphic designer.
Have
It's
you
a family affair.
got both books there?
I have, yeah.
Oh, good.
So
Let's see.
first one,
We saw a bit of one. You may have to
yeah.
hold them up a bit.
But I don't know if you want to look at this, but the Daily News, this
Oh,
picture of this, Central Asian girl looking upwards. This is the
okay.
heroine, if you like.
Can you
The
bring it
Daily
up?
News doesn't.
Bring it slightly
Sorry,
higher. That's it. Oh,
yeah.
yes.
So, but the
Yeah.
the strap line is there is nothing hidden that will not be revealed. So
Oh,
this is kind of the hidden misogyny that can go on around the world.
yes.
It can be revealed by an investigative journalism, someone who's got that
Oh,
passion to do it. So the
oh,
newspaper I created, the Daily News, which doesn't sound a very exciting title in itself, but there is nothing hidden that will not be revealed. It's the stuff of investigative journalism.
right.
And then the second one was a bit of a follow-up, which my daughter did as well. I don't know
Mm,
if you can see that, but there's a yurt there, a gare,
yes, see the bit.
up on
Yeah,
the back there,
yeah,
and no one hears you scream, but silence will be heard. It's a powerful statement, really, that
absolutely.
you,
Can you show me the spine? I'm intrigued how that fits on the spine. Up
my
slightly. That's it. Oh, yes. I love the font.
Yeah.
It's a really
yeah,
good font.
thank you, and it's a similar
Oh,
font to the first one as well.
yes,
So I think
that's
I
really
think,
good.
yeah. So there's the first one, yeah.
Oh,
So
yes.
it's good. They're quite. I think on the table at an event they look
Mm,
reasonably powerful. And I put a lot of stuff, 10 things you didn't know about Central Asia, on
right.
there, and a few flags and bits and pieces, very
Yeah,
basic stuff. But
sure.
just because no one knows anything about Central Asia, no one cares. But but I put that to just draw people in, and then they ask questions and that type of thing. And yeah, that's kind of what how I market a little bit.
Right. Andrea, when you'd written the book, you and NASA together, um, what was the next step for you? Was it, I just want to get us, Alastair, we need to get this out as quickly as possible? Because it does. I mean, it could take easily a year to get an agent, and then another year to get a
Mm.
publisher, maybe, and then another year to get it published. What was your
I
process?
went to the London Book Fair to find out what happens.
Okay.
I've come to this from a very, very different angle,
Mm,
and I was
I finished yesterday.
overwhelmed by everything that I saw there, and
Mm.
I took
Mm.
loads of information away, and then I started looking on the computer. And I decided I needed somebody to help me with publicity because it was completely sort of out of my range of experience. And I
mm,
didn't want to put something amateur, so I wanted somebody to support me to know what to do. And it ended up sort of paying for a package. But I got duped as I told you, and I chose the wrong company.
yeah.
Um, and I was so tempted to go with Troubadour because they'd got everything nicely laid out, but this one seemed a little cheaper at the
Right.
time. I thought, I'm am I worthy of going for a sort of a really well-known company or
Right.
not? And yeah, I shot myself in the foot really, but
Yeah.
it's a learning curve.
Well, I was going to say we live and
And I've
learn,
learned
don't
so
we?
much more than I probably would have done if somebody had
Right.
just
Yeah.
yeah.
Can
Well,
I, can
my
I, can, could I
yeah.
ask, did Andrea, was the company you went with, the slightly cheaper one, were they one of the people you picked up literature from at the London Book Festival, by the way, which happened Tuesday and Wednesday this week? I don't
Oh
know if you
yes,
knew
yes,
that, but
yes,
it was
yes,
on
yes.
this week. But was that one? Because you should make
No,
represent.
it wasn't. It
Ah,
wasn't. It was. I started sort of looking at what packages were, and then I found something on the internet,
ah,
and
okay.
I just got drawn into, I
Mm,
get this, and this for this amount of money, and I only get that for this amount of money. This one
mm,
looks much better value. And
Right.
as I said, I really didn't know the industry. I'm much, much wiser now.
Mm,
Um, and I was writing the book for NASA. I wasn't there to sort of make myself, that I didn't even on the book, my name is in small print. I've sort of really feel in the background of the book, but I just felt it was an important story to get out there, so it was worth investing in
mm,
getting it done properly.
mm,
But I just feel so much wiser now. I've gone through
mm.
the process, and yes, and the biggest joy I get is when somebody's read my book and they come and they want to talk to me about it.
Mm.
And that for me ticks all the boxes and makes
Mm.
it worthwhile spending 3 months with my leg up on the sofa.
Mm.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I mean,
Yeah,
we've said before, umpteen times before and earlier on, that I've was saying to Alastair earlier on that I've temped for a couple of decades in various industries, and there's nothing quite like publishing. We are, especially the self-published circuit, because we know how difficult it is to get anywhere and to
yeah,
be seen. I'm a member of, I'm all in nearly 600 Facebook related groups. And some of them have got, you think it's got 32,000 people. Brilliant. 32,000 people are going to see my advert for my book.
yeah,
And it's at the top of the page for about a second
yeah,
before somebody else posts, and then someone else posts, and then someone else posts, and soon it drops off the end.
yeah,
And everybody else is then saying, I've got a new book out, or please go and buy my 5-year-old book, because the sales aren't going very well. And it's so hard. It's
yeah,
really hard, which is why
yeah,
I set up the author spotlights in the first place.
yeah,
And then when I moved to Aylesbury a couple of years ago, was then I just happened to spot a book swap library and said, "Oh, next time," we kept going past it. I said, "Next time I'm here on my own, we'll stop and I'll go and have a look." And that was 18 months ago. And we've got so many of them around in the area, and they're so popular that I knew that there was a really good community here
yeah,
of readers. And then I put the shout out online, and I've got probably a couple of thousand mostly writers or readers, if not both, on Facebook, and gradually the word's getting round that this festival exists and these online panels. And so I have faith in the fact that I upped my Zoom subscription to allow 300 people in the room rather than 100, and more than 40 minutes, because
yeah,
pretty much every time we go over the free 40 minutes. And so it's just like anything. I think you get to know, read from a reader's point of view, you get to meet somebody, Zoom or in person, and go, actually, they're a very nice person. They've written a book that sounds interesting. I'll buy it and get him to sign it. And how exciting is it um, for any, especially somebody you don't know, you give your, you get, they buy your book and then they go, would you sign it? And I actually say this in my WI talk, that when I get to the first book I sold, which is the first workbook, which is about 3 covers ago, um and they go, would you sign my book? And I go, yes, I would, because it's still exciting. I'm 20 years into this, and
Mm.
it's
yeah,
still exciting when somebody you don't know wants to pay, especially these days, wants to give their hard-earned cash to buy something you've written,
yeah,
is quite
Yeah.
amazing.
yeah, 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 absolutely.
So, Andrea, what's next for you? Because you've written this book for NASA. Are you going to do something for yourself?
I'm actually writing NASA's sequel.
Oh, good.
Before Christmas, he felt the urge to go to Syria to celebrate the first anniversary. And he,
That's of his leaving, of his.
no, the first anniversary of El Sharaa being in power.
Oh, okay.
And
Right,
so he went to Syria. He met his brothers who went from Sweden
right.
to Syria. NASA's not allowed to go to Sweden, by the way, but that's another part of the story.
Yes.
And
Mentioned in the spotlight. Go and see Andrea's spotlight on YouTube.
thank
It'll
you.
be not far off from this is one of the recent spotlights, not far off from this recording.
Yes,
Yeah.
thank you. And so he went back again after Christmas to meet with the top brass.
Right. Wow.
And there's a bit of a story about that as well.
Okay.
And the story's, it's about NASA and his feelings, but it's that, I mean, there's lots of things in play. And at the essence of the book, what would you do if you had to set up a country from ground zero?
Yes.
What would you concentrate on first? What would be the problems? And there's the enemy without, which is mostly Israel, I hate to say.
Right.
And there's the enemy within. There's still corruption.
Mm,
There's not a set taxation system. A
mm,
lot of the area is still rubble. It hasn't been built up. There's lots and lots of things that need to happen.
mm,
And NASA really wants to be part of that.
mm.
But the end of the story, we don't know yet because he's
No.
back. He's back here. He's my
Yeah.
he's my tennis partner again, and
Right. Excellent.
yes,
Excellent.
and for now, I don't know how it's going to end. But
No.
he would really like to be part of making Syria a great place.
Sure. Because
And
that's the trouble with I can't watch war films. Tim loves war films, but I it's the one genre I don't like because it's just it's the ordinary person who's affected mostly by it.
yeah,
Every time a bomb drops, regardless, it's the ordinary people who are caught up in any of it. Imagine that if we don't feel safe in our own homes, has this process in any way made you think, actually, I quite like this writing lark. I might do something for me. Once NASA's story is up to date, do you think you might do something for
oh,
yourself?
I've got lots,
Non-fiction or
lots,
fictional?
lots of fictional. Well, I had a blog, Conversations with Marmite. I've actually considered turning that and extending that and making
Hmm.
it a story.
Okay.
I wrote letters to my dog, by the way,
Ah,
who sadly died, so I said goodbye
oh,
to him.
oh,
Yeah, so Marmite was the dog, and
right. Oh,
yeah,
bless.
it's a very understanding dog.
Oh, well, I have a series of dog detectives up there, and have
Okay,
great fun with a
yeah,
talking dog. Bless
yeah,
him. He was scratching at the door. I don't know if you may or may not have heard. This is a I think it's a condenser mic that shouldn't pick up too much of the
yeah,
surroundings. But the dog was scratching at the door, and the light I guess wasn't on on the landing because I heard this squeal
yeah.
and Tim going, "Oh, sorry, I didn't see that." He's a black dog in a
Yeah.
dark on a dark landing, and Tim's just gone into our room to I think to get changed because he's going out,
It's a
and
bit like with a cat then.
oh, we got two of those as well downstairs.
Yeah, yeah. Willie
One
the
one
Witch
one
had
called
fought over
Ginger who
her cat.
isn't.
Yeah, yeah,
One called Ginger who isn't, which is a long story. But they had a cat at the time called Algernon, and then I think the other wingmen of Biggles. So it was Biggles and Algernon, and so Ginger who isn't Ginger.
yeah.
She's a white tabby. She ended up being called Ginger, so she's become Ginger who isn't. So what's next for you, Alastair, after the trilogy? Do you have any idea of what you'd like to do next?
Yeah, I think I would like to. I'm going to continue writing. The trilogy will be done. I'll have. I'm not. I'm cutting it off there. I'm not going to write any more about Central Asia. What
No.
I've got off my chest, I've got off my chest, and that will
Sure.
be satisfying. But
Yeah.
I'd like to, look at unusual stories. Probably again factual, but put into fictional content. So I think that's what I don't want to say good at because that would be a bit arrogant, but it's what I feel comfortable doing, if you like, and and I feel, so but I haven't got that far into thinking any
So-
further where I'll go. I haven't even got a title for the third book at the moment. I was
Oh,
just looking
okay.
it up. I
You've
was
got a
looking
lot
it
to
up
live
now.
up to though with the second one.
Pardon?
You've got a lot
Yes.
to live up to with the second one.
Well, I have it. I think you're right there. It was a I've often truth is stranger than fiction, isn't it? And so therefore you come up with someone's words and it speaks more powerfully than a made up title, if you like. I'm
Yeah.
actually working on a sort of working title of Missing Presumed Trafficked.
Oh,
Um,
okay.
and
That
or
works.
and then and which I don't think I've looked it up. There's also this I'm a great one for being an editor, a tennis editor, I used to have always had a subtitle,
Mm.
and you know, I've got this subheading. It's a bit long though. That which has been is now. That which is to be has already been, because it's a quote from Ecclesiastes, book of Ecclesiastes, and I could use that as, because this trafficking thing is linked to war crimes from the 1991 breakup of the Soviet Union, when there was a lot of conflict, and so that's all in there as well. So
Mm.
and the discovery of the war crimes brings about the trafficking. So it's kind
Right.
of that's kind of the journey I'm kind of working on. So, uh,
Mm.
I can only, I'm not like a female, dare I say it, that can think of lots of things at one go. I have to
Right.
focus on what I'm doing.
Yeah. But I,
What I'm
I
doing.
write a lot of I've got a couple of collections of short stories, so I love writing short stories. If I could make a living out of writing short stories, I'd love it. Back in the day,
Mm,
2005, you could. But I very rarely have a title when I write short stories. And
okay.
often when I'm writing something, there was one that initially started, the working title was The Journey, and I knew it
Mm,
wouldn't be end up as The Journey.
mm,
And there was one thing, there was a lady who gets sent postcards, and she's in a bit of a abusive, or just kind of under the thumb, not abusive, but under the thumb. And she doesn't really, she doesn't have a life of her own. It's very much about what the husband wants to do. And she gets sent postcards from friends and family all over the world, to the point where on their fridge is, there's no white left on their fridge, because it's full of all these places that she'd love to go to. And so the story ended up being called No White Left, and which I think is intriguing. It's a
mm,
fine line between having something, does what it says on the tin, or
mm.
something that you pick up and, okay, what's that about?
Bit of mystery, yes.
Exactly. But so
Mm.
I'm sure when you're writing it, something will go, oh yeah, that's perfect. That's a
We'll,
perfect title.
we'll see. Hopefully.
Anyway, thank you so much, both of you, especially Alastair. You've been thrown in today. We literally had our chat half an hour before this started,
Mm, mm,
so I'm very grateful, because it's always nice to have at least two other people to
mm,
bounce off.
mm.
And
No,
Andrea,
thank you.
lovely to see you again,
Mm.
Thank
and
you.
hopefully see you in more TNTs and Monday midday mini fests as they've become. So thank you very much. We'll see you again soon.
Yes, it
Thank
was
you.
very nice. Thank you very much.
Very
Thank you.
welcome.
Bye
Thanks,
bye.
Andrea. God bless. Bye
Bye.
bye.